Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor and subscribe to the Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. And you can find us on YouTube at Empire Media, AMPIRE. You get there, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let's keep rolling. Well, today, it's August 4th. The Commanders have an abbreviated practice. Really, it's more of a recovery day for guys. So we're not going to do a practice report. Instead, and I told you this yesterday, going to bring on a special guest, and that's former Washington defensive end Ryan Kerrigan. And we go over a lot of things, just why he wants to coach, what he thinks of Montez Sweat, Chase Young, the wisdom that he can impart, what made him a really good pass rusher, his routines, how hard is it to give up, and much more in his playing career, and why it meant so much to him to play here, and what having a career where he spent almost his entire time here, what it meant to him for that too. So we get into all that. So I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get to my conversation with former defensive end Ryan Kerrigan. Well, I'm now joined by Coach Ryan Kerrigan, working with the D lineman in practice. First of all, congrats on the retirement. We'll get to that in a minute. But what's it been like to be working with the players this week in practice?
It's been really fun. It's pretty informal capacity. I'm just kind of here, just chiming in when I'm asked at training camp, and I really appreciate Coach Rivera for the opportunity just to be around the guys and impart what I can during training camp. It's really good time for the guys to develop, and I hope I can assist in any way.
What kind of things are you doing? Because are you pulling guys aside and talking? What are you doing to help?
Just basically be a sounding board. I mean, if guys have questions, and I can be here to offer any insight that I have, and also just to kind of be there for the coaches if they need anything, and want my insight on anything.
How many guys are guys like, would Montez come up to you, or do you go up to Montez? Have you talked to him much about anything? And
yeah, I mean, I've been I've talked to Sweat a good amount, a couple other guys too, Hill and James, and really anybody who's had a question. I'm just trying to be there and just answer it to the best of of what I think's going to help them and add to their game.
Do you feel like you're getting a different perspective now? Of course, some of these guys from 2 years ago, but do you feel like you're getting a different perspective now, watching them practice, how they go about things, and just from a different perspective or through a different lens?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I know, like, you're watching it from more of okay, can I see anything that'll help these guys? Can I see anything that's gonna make a difference in their game? And so yeah, you do kind of see it through a different lens. Not too different though. I mean, when I for the past couple of years, really, I've kind of watched and tried to help guys. I've kind of taken that role when I was even playing. So as I got older, so it's definitely different than it was when early in my career. I was more so just watching myself, trying to figure out how I could get better.
Would you go up to guys and like, if Chase or Montez were struggling with something or had an issue with something, would you go up to them and say, hey, this is how I did, or this is my suggestion? Would they come to you? How would things like that work?
I'd mainly let them come to me. I mean, I feel like as a young player in the league, sometimes you have you're hearing a lot of different voices. And I feel like, if you don't want to cloud, you don't want to make anything more gray for somebody. You just want to, if they approach you, then you can offer your insight. But I initially, you just don't want to jumble their minds anymore.
With a guy like Chase, he had strong finish in that rookie year. You were there. You saw him. I remember talking to you after that year, and the high hopes you had for him. Last year, the numbers weren't there, and so there was, I know they would like him to become, would have liked a different year as a pass rusher for getting the sack totals. But what do you think some of the challenges are for a guy like Chase as a pass rusher developing, because you had to go through that as well?
Yeah, going rushing from the college game to rushing to the pros, it's you would think it'd be a lot of the same, but it's pretty different. I mean, I remember in college, I basically just relied on my athleticism and strength, and we could win with those things, because a lot of times you were able to do that, just run around a guy. But in the pros, you got to be more technically savvy, which fortunately for Chase, he is really technically sound. And, I mean, you see a lot of the guys that come out of Ohio State, they have incredible hands and hips, and it's a credit to their coaches that are able to teach them that. So you gotta find what works for you in the pros. And, that's kind of what's exciting about a guy like Chase, because he's still figuring it out, and he's already, proven to be an exciting player.
Just so you know, I had good hands and hips coming out of Ohio State too. So, just to make sure we knew that.
It's in the water there, right?
There you go. But, but how long do you think it took you to go from being that college guy where you can win a certain way to being able to win a different way in the NFL?
It took me until I would say my fourth year when I really, because I'd give a lot of that credit to Brian Baker when he came in. He found for me, it was just taking an appropriate angle to the quarterback. I think because what I had mentioned earlier, in college, you got used to kind of just running around people. And I think you have bad habits with doing, I had bad habits with doing that. And so I thought I could do that in the pros, and I couldn't do that. And so I really had to adjust my angle and, work on taking a more efficient route to the quarterback. And that's when I really felt like my game changed, and I, was able to, consistently put up, good sack numbers and good pass rush productivity.
And that's when you started getting the 13.5s, and you made the 4 Pro Bowls. Was at around that point, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, it really, that's, like I said, that's when it took off and changed for me. And I felt like I made the transition from a solid pass rusher to a good one.
And you said with Brian Baker, who was a pass rush specialist, he was only here 1 year too, if I remember right.
Yeah, he was only here for 2014, but he made a massive impression on my game, and I credit him for everything that's transpired. Because he was so demanding of me. He coached me so hard, and I remember one time in a preseason game that year against Baltimore, I got a sack on Joe Flacco, and I got a minus on my play sheet after the game. And Brian Arakpo and I are looking at each other like, what the hell? How the hell did I get a friggin' minus? I got a sack. And he's like, look how bad your path to the quarterback is. And he's right. I had a pretty roundabout way of getting there. And now I did get there, so I got a sack. So I'm like, still how is it a minus, buddy? But I mean, I think that that kind of attention to detail is what really changed things for me.
So can you bring that now, even if it's just in training camp? And I know, if it's only here, but can you bring some of that to these guys, or how can you impart some of that to these guys throughout this month?
And it's all about, whatever they want to know from me. Again, with some guys, when you're a young guy, you sometimes can be out there just, focusing on making sure you're doing your job right from an assignment standpoint. And, the little intricacies of pass rushing and of operating as an edge rusher kind of come later. So I'm just going to be here for as I'm needed. I don't want to, put any more on guys than I have to, or than they want to. And I'm just going to be here as I'm needed.
What have you thought about Montez Sweat this camp?
He looks awesome as always. I mean, he's really taken a leadership role too, which is really cool to see, and also a little strange just because he was such a young guy when I was here playing. So to see him in the kind of the elder statesman role is it's pretty cool. But he's a dominant force and can be a dominant force in this league, and I want to see that from him because I love seeing talent manifested and realized, and he certainly is. He has talent for days.
He's also, last summer, we really saw him maybe talking more trash during practice, chirping more during practice. Has he become more vocal from what you remember?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you definitely hear his voice a lot more out there now, and I love it. He's a very charismatic dude. He's a guy that people want to follow. And so they're looking to him and for leadership, and he's giving it to them. And so it's really cool to see.
So whenever anybody asks me about, would so-and-so want to coach? I'm like, most of these guys are too smart to go into coaching because they've made a lot of money, and like the lifestyle is this and that. You're crazy because you want to go into this. Why is it that you want to go in? And I just kid about that because I understand, but why do you want to try and become a coach?
Well, I've kind of, I'd always had that mentality too, John. The same one, like, for probably my first 9 years in the league, I was like, no, hell no, never, hard pass. And just, like you said, because of the hours and whatnot. But the past couple of years, you kind of realize that I've kind of realized that how much I love just the overall camaraderie, the togetherness of being in the building with guys, and there's much more to being in the NFL than just playing and whatnot. And so I think that's what I've found. I found that, that I do want to approach this path. And I mean, I don't know if that's going to be a forever thing. If I truly, will end up going down this route, but I feel like I'd be foolish not to experiment and not to explore it, especially if, Coach Rivera has given me, an opportunity to do it in an informal way like this. So. Yeah.
And then, do you talk to your wife about that? Because that puts a burden on the family too. Do you talk to her and say, hey, are you okay with this?
She's very encouraging about it. She wants me to do it. Because she knows that, she knows how much I love football. She loves, when I come home after a day and I have, stories of, what happened, and, oh, so-and-so said this, and this funny thing happened. And my girls, they love football. Like, they had so much fun at games last year, and I'm bummed that, they didn't get to go in 2020, because that would have just been more games that they could have gone to with me as a player. But they love football. They love going to games. So I would imagine be the same if I am coaching, even if I'm not playing.
I understand that they thought you were a different player in Philadelphia.
You understand what?
That they thought their dad was a different player when they'd watch the Eagles games.
Yeah, they'd see Jalen Hurts running around last year, and they'd be like, "Oh, Daddy scored a touchdown," and I'd be like, "Well, not really, but yay!" So, yeah, it was. They have a hell of a time at the games.
What's been the hardest habit for you to give up that you used to adhere to, or have you?
Sorry, the hardest habit.
Like, because you were such a every day, this is how it is, and you talked about getting some freedom from that. First of all, have you given up anything of your daily routine? And if so, what was the hardest to give up?
I'd say just how rigid my schedule was. That's really lessened, and that's what's been really nice. Like, if I don't eat by a certain time, I'm not stressed out. Like, if I don't, if I didn't, if I didn't, maybe hydrate as much as I did before,
300
ounces of water I drink, like I'm just not as stressed out about that anymore, and it's really nice. So yeah, just little things like that. I'm sure it'll, over time will continue to happen. And yeah.
Were your parents like that? Did they have habits like that you got that from? Where did you get that ability to be that regimented with it?
My parents, but also my older brother, Kyle. I really learned a lot from him in terms of discipline, in terms of like, you might have to give some things up if you want something greater. Like, I remember, he was the first person who I really saw nutrition and diet, have a positive impact on his, his life and his performance. And so I really took a lot of that discipline from him. And he's definitely someone that, I learned a lot from.
So you had talked in your press conference about, like, if you're on the road, they don't have chicken and rice. Oh no. Was there a time where they didn't have something you wanted, and what did you do?
Sorry, I lost you a little bit there.
Okay, sorry. So you said in your press conference about how, like, you would get so rigid with it that, like, you've got to have that chicken and rice for a certain meal. Were there times where you couldn't get that? And if you couldn't, what would you do?
Yeah, there would be times, like, if I had if it was like a Monday or a Tuesday in the off season, in the season, and we, I had like a charity event or something to go to, and like, the food might not have been as, as healthy as, I feel as I would like, I think I would want to just, postpone eating as long as I could until I could get something nutritious. But I guess, from an athlete's standpoint, it's almost better to eat something that's maybe not, ideal than to not eat at all. So that's, that's how I had to approach it in some instances like that. But I usually was pretty good about, making sure that, kind of preparing that if I knew, there wasn't going to be what I needed available, that I would kind of pivot and have a plan.
So when you were on the road for games, you never had an issue?
What's that?
When you were on the road for games, you didn't have an issue?
Oh, for games now. And usually, for game day is such a well-oiled machine with how the food that they have available, and the resources to get warmed up. It was game day was never an issue.
How weird was it for you last year to be somewhere else?
It was very weird. You're here for a whole decade, and you got your routine, you got your massage therapist, you got your the doctors that you see throughout the week, to help you get ready for the game, and to go somewhere else and have to find all those new things, and also still have to deal with a level of like COVID restrictions. That made it tough. I definitely I respect guys that have bounced around the league and have to go city to city, because it kind of last year kind of put things into perspective for me.
Because that spring you wanted to come back and they wanted to go another direction that happens in the NFL. I asked this question not to have you criticize anybody here, because you're obviously working the organization. They wanted you back for this. But last year, when you're a free agent and we didn't know about the knee, and maybe I'm sure they probably did. But when you hear like, hey, we're going to go in a different direction, and this is a team you're for, how hard was that to go through? Even if their reasons are right, sound, whatever, how hard personally is it to hear that and to go through?
Yeah, it was difficult. I mean, you understand that it's a business, and you understand that they're ultimately going to do what they think is best for the team. But I think one of the things that made my career here special to me is that it always meant a little more to me here and that's why even though it is a business, it was always hard for me to think of it as a business, because it meant more to me emotionally and whatnot. So yeah, that was difficult, but again, it is a business, whether I have the ability to look at it that way or not. So
why was football so important to you to take the approach you did? I mean, you really seem to, as you said, your life was football. Why was it so important to you?
I think I had a really good grasp of the fact that how cool my job was, that being an NFL player, you get to play on TV, you get to play in front of, everybody watching, and I know I had a strong contingency of people throughout my time in college and my time home in Muncie that were watching. And so I knew I wanted to make them proud watching. And so I always tried to work, do everything I could to be the best I could be. And I also knew that how blessed I was to and am to have the abilities that I had. And so I wanted to maximize those talents, and I knew that I had to put in the extra work to maximize those talents. And so it wasn't an easy thing to do to execute, but to make that decision to do everything I needed to do was an easy decision.
So when you come to the decision to retire, and you said it sounds like it was a fairly, I don't want to say easy, because I know how hard it still probably is, but you knew it was the right decision. When it hits in your head, hey, I'm done. What is the emotion like? Are you relieved? Are you sad? What is it like?
Right now, I'm relieved, because I knew where the road was going. I knew I was going to not be playing football this year, and because just actually execute it and to make it a known thing. I feel a lot of relief right now, and I'm happy about that. I'm sure when games start in September, that I'm gonna miss it a little bit. Especially seeing some guys from my class, still playing. That'll be tough. But at the same time, when you have a couple jarring doctor's reports, it's kind of like you kind of have to check the I want to play football
right.
side of you out of it, and be like, you got 3 young kids, man. Let's think about this one. And so it was, and like I had mentioned in my press conference, I had time to kind of wrap my mind around it. I knew going into last season that it was going to be my last, and so I was able to, no playing Tampa Bay in that playoff game, that it was my last game. And a lot of guys don't get that. They just kind of, they don't get to know that when they're playing their last game. So I'm fortunate that I got to know that in the moment.
And, and so when we had talked in the spring briefly or communicated, and at that point you were still working to come back. And
Right.
You said that was it something that your knee was still bothering you, or did something happen that caused it to bother you again?
So I'll give you a little brief recap. So I knew going into the season, last season was going to be my last one. Knew going into the Tampa playoff game. Then I play really well in the Tampa playoff game. I take 2 months off. I take a couple months off after the season to just kind of let my body and mind just kind of take a break, because it had been a really emotionally trying however many months. And after I take some time off, I have a good playoff game. I start to think like I was still riding me off the high from that playoff game. I'm thinking like, you know what, maybe I'll give this another shot. And so I started training again. Was good through March, April, because I wasn't really doing a lot of running at that point. Then, I started, running and doing a lot of change of direction again come May and June. And I'm just like, man, like, I gotta stop. I gotta listen to my body. I gotta listen to, common sense and just not do it. And so I ultimately made the final decision like late June this year. And, because I stopped, training and working out after that. And this was waiting for the right time to announce.
So just a couple more things, and I appreciate your time. So when you get to that point, do you take a moment to reflect, like it really is over, and or you just say, hey, it's over, it's okay?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, mostly has been, hey, it's over, because again, I knew that it would be over, even going into last season. So I've had a lot of time to, realize, have the finality of everything, to have the, here, this will be my last, in season lift. This will be my last, this will be my last football practice. This will be my last football flight, with the team. This will be my last game. So I've had all those. I knew all those things, and I got to experience all those things. And I really think that, lifted any emotional burden that would have come up, in June, when I ultimately, finally, when I stopped training, and knew I wasn't, it was going to be done.
What does that streak mean to you? And we know the concussion ended it, but how many times was it close? I think the one time was wrist, but how many times was it really close to where you're saying, I don't know if I can go this week? Let's start with what did the streak mean to you?
It meant a lot. I mean, because I always, like I said, I knew a lot of people, watched the games even from back home, but I also, knew a lot of Washington fans really enjoyed watching me play each week. So, if I could be out there, I was going to be out there, and not just be out there, but I was going to play my ass off. And so that definitely meant a lot to me to be out there on the field so much. I'd say the only time I was ever really concerned was 2016. We had played a Monday Night Football game against Carolina, and we had a Saturday game at Chicago the following. And I had hyperextended my elbow early in that season, and then I re-aggravated it that Carolina game, and my arm was like really jacked up, like going into the Chicago game. And I remember sitting there with my wife on the couch. I'm like thinking like, man, I really don't know if I'm, it's kind of a toss up. I don't know if I'll be able to play this week. And I just, been selected to the Pro Bowl that week too. And so I'm like, man, like I can't, not play a game right after my, I get selected to the Pro Bowl. So fortunately, toward the end of the week, my arm started, feeling better. Tricep was firing a little better, and I was able to play. But that was really the moment where I was like, holy shit, like I might not be able to play this week.
Do you need surgery on your knee?
Yeah, I will. I mean, it's pretty banged up. You kind of, when you're young, you don't really you sometimes don't understand the implications of, of some of the injuries you have. And that's was certainly the case with me with my knee injury. I think, for players, I think it's really important to understand this. If you have an injury, to understand the structure of your injured part, know whatever got hurt. For me, it was a torn meniscus, I didn't really understand the function of the meniscus at the time. I was just kind of the mindset, like, it's, it's not the big one or anything thing. So it's like, just, if it doesn't hurt so bad, keep playing. And that was not a good not a good mindset to have. And yeah, I was able to have a long playing streak and whatnot, but you kind of wonder, like, was that the right decision? And you make the decisions you make at the time, and you figure it out from there.
I shredded my meniscus 2 years ago and had surgery, and it feels fantastic now. So, but of course, I think we shredded it doing different things. So I was not chasing the quarterback. Last thing, how would you, first of all, I want to, as someone who covered you the whole time, I want to thank you for your professionalism the whole time. Always a treat to deal with, always a pleasure, very respectful. So I thank you for that. But how would you sum up your career?
I mean, it's all kind of a dream, really. I mean, like, I mean, you sit there, you can envision, as a kid playing pro football, and, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But then, like, to actually get to live it, it's almost like it doesn't seem real in some aspects. Like, I kind of had said it in my, my statement I put out, that, like, I can't, like, sometimes I think about my football life and the life I've been able to live because of football, and I can't believe it's me. Mm-hmm. And so, like, and I still kind of have that. It's just, it's crazy to think, like, I played for one of the oldest franchises in the league, and I'm, the franchise sack leader for that team. It's just, it all still is like, it's like, wow, like, this is freaking crazy. And so but man, it's unbelievable. I've been incredibly fortunate, and, great people along the way, unbelievable teammates and everything. And it's cool that I got to be, and here, in Washington for basically my whole career. And, not many guys get to play there, play with one team for a decade. So I'm really, really thankful for that.
Ryan, thank you very much. And I'm glad you're still around helping out. It's good to see you out there. And it's nice to see you smile and being relaxed with this decision, because it always lets someone know that you're at peace with it. And it makes others, I think, feel good about where you're at, because you like to see when people go out on their own terms. So, but anyways, thank you very much for coming on.
Hey, thanks, John.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Ryan for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back with another practice report on Friday. Talk to you next time.